What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special. And again, we got another inflation headline today. This time it's the Producer Price Index, or PPI, coming in hotter than the market was expecting. We're going to dive into those numbers, look at what it means, and what could be on the horizon for the inflation story here in the U.S. You ready? Hit it. Thank you for joining me. I'm Jack Gamble, and I'm Nobody Special. And another day, another inflation headline. Today, it's the Producer Price Index making headlines, coming in at 7.3% increase year over year. Now, the market was expecting a 6.8% increase. That's also a 1% month over month increase versus a 0.6% increase the market was expecting. That's the biggest rise in PPI since November of 2010. Any way you look at it, across the board, inflation is coming in more than expected. So it would appear that all of these experts and analysts are drinking a little bit too much of the transitory Kool-Aid these days, because it seems like every month it comes in hotter than expected. So at what point are we going to expect hotter? Now, for some reason, the feds love to strip out food and energy costs from their measurements because people don't need to eat, people don't need clean running water, businesses don't need power, all that. But even if you strip out food and energy, we're still looking at a 0.5% increase month over month. So any way you look at it, inflation is just running hot in this country. Now, this is the Producer Price Index. Another way to look at this versus yesterday, which is the Consumer Price Index, is the Producer Price Index is the cost of doing business. The Consumer Price Index is the cost of living. Now, that may be a gross oversimplification because these indexes have a lot more nuance than that. But for the sake of argument, I want to draw a difference between producer and consumer. Now, the reason I say that is because the PPI can be looked at as a number that front runs CPI. Now, again, it's not a perfect correlation, but a higher PPI this month would suggest that we have at least one more month of big CPI numbers ahead of us as the businesses pass on their increased costs to the consumers. That's typically the way it works. Now, all of these Fed apologists keep saying that all these big reads in CPI and PPI are due to used cars mostly, and the situation with the shortage of chips leading to a shortage of new cars putting pricing pressure on used cars. And that is the case. A large portion of this PPI read came from the auto market. However, what these people don't say is the reason the auto market is in such turmoil is because of inflation. It's a chicken or the egg scenario. Are we seeing higher inflation because of the auto market, or is the auto market seeing higher prices because of inflation? Because go behind the scenes, what's causing the shortage in chips and the shortage in new cars? There's so much congestion at U.S. ports because we dumped all these stimmies into the market and people spent it, and they're buying so much of this Chinese crap that it's clogging up our ports. And since it's clogging up our ports, we can't get the chips off of the boat. And then when we finally do get them off of the boat, we don't have any truck drivers to drive them to the factories because truck drivers are getting paid more to stay home, or it's just not worth it for them to come back to work, or there's so much stuff that needs to be moved, there aren't enough drivers to move it. And then when we do get it to the factory, there's no factory workers to put them into the cars, or at least there's a shortage of them because, again, people aren't coming back to work. And why aren't they coming back to work? Because it's not worth their time. Wages have not increased. Wages need to increase. So I am not totally sold that the reason we have inflation is because of the car market. I'm a little bit more of the reason we have the car market in the scenario we have right now is because of inflation. Well, time will tell. Because I think even if the situation in the auto market levels off and corrects a little bit, I think we're going to see something else pop up in its place. Some other unintended consequence of all these stimmies that we've been dropping down from heaven. Now, there's another factor in this PPI read that I want to call attention to, and that's that food prices rose 0.8% month over month. And the reason I call out food prices is because we're starting to see unrest in Cuba, and we're starting to see unrest in South Africa. Now, those two stories may not be directly correlated, right? You've got struggling under decades of oppression and a communist dictatorship in Cuba, and then you've got decades and decades of racial tensions and political turmoil involving a former president in South Africa. So the two stories may not be directly correlated, but I can tell you this. When it gets too expensive to eat, people get pissed off. And any time in history when food prices have gone up so fast, there has been widespread social unrest. So there are real world consequences of these inflation numbers. These are not just mild inconveniences for weekenders who are filling up on their way to the shore. There are real world consequences of these inflation numbers. Now, you've got a lot of people in the news are saying that they think inflation has peaked, or that, this is the worst it's going to get. We're not going to see any more. And that may be right, because, we did see some of the commodities, lumber especially, took a breather in June, right? I mean, lumber crashed in June. And some of the base metal prices have stopped going up, and some of the grain prices have come down. So we very well may see that PPI starts to level off soon, and then shortly after that, CPI should start to level off. But there's one thing that all these Timmy transitories keep ignoring, and that is wage pressure. All right, we saw it yesterday in the CPI number. Wages only rose 0.3% when you had a 0.6% month-over-month increase. So real wages are going down in terms of spending power. All right, if we really want the situation in the auto market, or the situation with the truck drivers and the ports and everything else that's going on, if we really want these shortages to alleviate, we have to start paying people more. It's a fact. But if we keep paying people more, we're going to get more price increases. And that could lead to more shortages. So all these Timmy transitories are just assuming everybody's going to come back to work without a raise. And I'm not sure that's really the case. Now, again, September, the expanded unemployment benefits are set to expire. Assuming they don't get renewed, and that may not be a safe assumption, but assuming they don't get renewed, we should see some people come back to work. But I'm not convinced it's going to convince everybody to come back to work, especially in the face of rising childcare costs, right? People who stayed home to be with the kids, and they figured that with childcare being so expensive, it would be cheaper to just have one parent working. They may stay home. We don't know. And if wages don't go up, that's certainly not going to help. So I'm really not convinced that this labor shortage is going to go away. And because the labor shortage isn't going away, those wage pressures are going to stay. And that's going to have upward pressure on prices, both PPI and CPI. So again, I'm not really buying into this transitory narrative. Now, it very well may slow or taper off, but it's not going to be over until we start paying more. And when we start paying more, it's going to cause more price hikes. Anyways, guys, that's just my 2 cents. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It would really help me out. And in the meantime, live small and dream big.